Hello, you're listening to Me and Paranormal You with your host, Ryan Singer. Because it's more fun to believe. Hey, everybody, this is Ryan. I'm just popping in before this amazing interview with Samantha Faye, just to let you know my hotspot went out at the very, very end. So there's going to be, I guess, what you would call an abrupt ending to the interview. It's going to sound abrupt, but that's just because the Wi-Fi went out. But yeah, just a reminder, you can go to my website, ryansingercomedy.com. You can check tour dates, what I've got coming up later in the year. I'll be announcing a December tour with some friends of mine later that I'm very excited about, and some other news. But in the meantime, you can just, give a follow on all the socials, make sure to share the podcast with people who you think might enjoy it. And make sure to check out all of Samantha's 2 podcasts and her book, The Awake Dreamer, the Psychic Teachers podcast, Enlightened Empaths podcast. Lots of great stuff going on. So let's just get into the conversation with the wonderful Samantha Faye. Hey, everybody. I just hit record in the middle of our pre-show chat. I have got the one, the only Samantha Faye, co-host of Psychic Teachers, co-host of Enlightened Empaths, author, also contributor in a foundational way to the Crystallize app. This is the book, although we're not putting the video up. I'm showing you your own book, which is ridiculous. But I love this. I love having my physical copy of The Awake Dreamer, A Guide to Lucid Dreaming, Astral Travel, and Mastering the Dreamscape. What a pleasure to sit down and chat with you again. We actually just got to meet in real life recently, after years of chatting and becoming buds. It was great.
It was so fun. I was trying to tell people, like, I've known you for years and we've Zoomed before and, talked on the phone and been on each other's podcast, but I never got to meet you in person. And I just want to say to everyone listening, if you have a chance to see Ryan do his comedy thing in person, you've got to go. You lit up the whole room. It was extraordinary. And I was cracking up the whole time.
Well, it's very kind of you to say that. And it's always fun. It's always more fun and enjoyable to perform when people are there on purpose, right? Or when you have friends there, or that kind of situation, as opposed to a room full of strangers, which also is its own energy and its own thing. But when there's friendly faces there, so to speak, it adds a level of enjoyment to performance that I think anyone who's or even given talks, which you two at conferences and things like that, that when someone is there, and excited and looking forward to it, it also really helps and creates a great environment for the talk or the performance or presentation.
True. But even when I give talks, I need to have a podium in front of me, a crystal in my hand, and a PowerPoint behind me because I get so nervous. And it was just really neat to see you on stage as though you were making yourself a snack. It was so confident, so comfortable.
That's a great phrase. On stage as if I'm making myself a snack. That's really I want to remind people about The Awake Dreamer. This was your first book, and it's available. You can go to samanthafay.com. And what's the major hub where you'd want to send people, by the way, to check this book
I think
out?
it's really, Amazon has it, Barnes and Noble has it. It's really fun. A lot of listeners will send me pictures of being in random bookstores and they'll find the book and they send me a screenshot. That just makes my whole day. I love seeing that. So it's in bookstores too.
That would be great. Yeah. That would be a great feeling for that to happen. There's so many people. I kind of want to talk to you about this. And kind of want to talk to you about it, meaning I want to talk to you about this. I think there's some misconceptions still out there about, taking control of your dream life and the dreamscape and astral travel. And some people still have hangups about it regarding, whether it's religious beliefs or to the point where they think it's like dabbling in like quote unquote black magic almost, or the dark arts, which I guess, being kind of in this world and, having conversations about these topics on a regular basis, it never occurs to me that people are still kind of holding on to that kind of viewpoint regarding this.
Well, I have a chapter on scary dreams in the book, but if anyone loves stuff that's scary, I definitely recommend Nightmare Land by Lex Nover. Very, very good. So I do think scary things are out there. I don't ascribe to a lot of spiritual beliefs that say, "Oh, it's all love and light and there's nothing negative." I don't really believe that. I do believe there's negative stuff out there, and I think you can call it in. But I also believe you can just as easily protect yourself from all of that. And if you set the intention to have a really rich dream life that's focused on positive or healing or manifesting or getting deeper insight, that's what you're going to get. But if you set the intention of, ooh, I wonder what kind of creepy things I can see if I astral travel in my dreams, well, that's what you're going to get. So I think it's really about intention and what you're expecting. And so I do think people are right to be cautious, but not afraid. I think there's a big
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah. And I think, especially in regards of, even wanting to involve yourself in a more active way in your dreams in this way, you're not you're not going against some great moral law of the universe by doing so, in my opinion, right? And uh, so when people kind of pull back and like, oh, that's some devil stuff, or whatever they might say, that to me is shocking when I hear something like that, especially when I'm thinking of something like dreams, right?
Right.
And as opposed to, it's not like we're talking about like, you know animal sacrifice or whatever, like that's to me like the dark stuff, when uh people start talking about that, or even, you know
The
insinuating
Ouija
things like
board.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
I
i
mean,
love a I love a Ouija board, but that's a personal choice.
but you always hear that that's the gateway to scary stuff, right? But even in the Bible, I mean, how many dream stories are in the Bible? How many wonderful miracles? And I mean, look at Joseph. Where would he be without his dreams? I mean, there's so many. There's a rich, rich history going back to the ancient Sumerians, the ancient Greeks, all the way up to the Bible and today of dreams being able to really help us. It's a time when I feel most of us are going throughout our day and we're just doing and we're going and we're distracted and we're getting text and we're pulled in all these different directions, so that if our higher self or our guides or our angels are trying to talk to us, they're not going to get anything through to that. But when we fall asleep and all that rest and calms down and it's just us and we're finally at rest, that's when our soul, I think, sometimes at night can travel and we can interact with these higher beings for guidance and comfort and inner knowing.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a really cool idea to be able to do the work while you're not having to do any work.
Yeah.
And kind of, I don't know, not being more productive necessarily, in like the modern society kind of way, but actually trying to get some benefits. And I think, would you say that, setting a clear intention about that, you mentioned that already, is that one of the big keys to success in this area?
Yeah, I think setting the intention, recording your dreams is really important. Whether you do that audio, you can just, there's actually apps that help you record dreams. So you can just hit the microphone on your phone and record them. You can write it down, but that definitely helps. I also have had a lot of success writing down a question that I'm worried about in my own life and just slipping it under my pillow. Of course, because you and I love crystals, I have a little bag of crystals that are really good for dreaming, like lapis or amethyst, Herkimer diamond, unakite, moonstone, and I'll put the little paper in that little bag of crystals and put that under my pillow. But you don't have to use crystals. And I've noticed I won't have a dream with an answer to that question the first night or even the fourth or fifth night, but usually within a week or two, I will have a pretty interesting dream that will give me the next step, at least, of where I need to go.
Oh, that's interesting. I love this idea of just kind of, putting it there for the dream fairy almost underneath your pillow.
Yeah. And because it's our, I think it works on our subconscious, which then talks to the collective unconscious, which then all connects. And you just never know what's going to come out of this. I have an exercise in the book that I did not create. It's from Napoleon Hill, and it's about creating your dream team. And it's just where you ask a bunch of people who died that you really admire and respect to be on your dream team, and you're giving them permission to come into your dreams and give you some answers and insight. And Deb, my co-host and dear friend, she was like, all right, I'm going to try this because she's working on a project. And she's like, all right, who do I want on my team? She picked all these people, wrote it down, wrote down her intentions, thought about it as she was falling asleep. She had a dream that Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, came to her and said she'd like to join the dream team. And Deb was like, well, I don't, she's working on a writing project, and she's like, I don't want to write Frankenstein, or I don't want to write anything scary.
Well, wait,
And she
no,
wakes up
she did
the
not
next
deny Mary Shelley a place on the dream team, did she? This is crazy. Okay, sorry.
kind of did. And then she looks at Facebook or something that morning, and it's Mary Shelley's birthday. And she's like, what is going on here? And I can't remember. Something else happened that day that someone mentioned Mary Shelley. And I was like, Deb, I think she's on your dream team now. So we think this is all kind of happening in our quote unquote imagination, and yet maybe not.
Wow, that's really funny. I mean, the that's so funny to me. Deb just being like, well, Mary Shelley, thank you for your interest in my dream team. But, I kind of, already had some other people in
Went with
mind.
someone else.
Oh, that's so funny. Um, yeah, I'm definitely going to try to assemble a dream team now.
Yeah.
And
It's really, really helpful because you do use your imagination because you're supposed to think about them as you're falling asleep. And I always picture myself in this library, and we're all just sitting around this table in this beautiful library. And I'll ask them questions about something I'm trying to work on in my own work life. And sometimes I'll get an answer, sometimes I won't, but I'll fall asleep to that. And then I will usually have a dream that makes me go, oh, that's what I need to focus on.
oh, okay. That's really cool. And I have started very recently again, trying to be very active and have recollection. And there is a connection between the thing you're falling asleep to. Like, I'm reading this book called UFO of God about this guy Chris Bledsoe, and I had a dream just a couple nights ago that Chris and I were just hanging out, like going around doing all kinds of stuff. And but what's interesting was I had set an intention earlier that night to try to dream about something else, to see if I could, get something else going. And then I remember at one point almost being like, Chris, this is great, but like I'm trying to like be somewhere else right
You were
now.
firing him too, just like Deb
Yeah,
and Mary
it's just
Shelley.
like what's the point? Like that's so wild to me that I would even be doing that. But
Have you listened to his son's podcast, Bledsoe Said So?
no, not yet. Once I finish
It's
the
good.
book, I'm gonna get into the podcast. Because I'd love to get, both of them on the show. And I've sent an email out and I've reached out. I hope to hear back, but because it's, really, really fascinating story.
It is. And it happened right up the road from me. So you were just in a
Yeah.
town very close to where all that went down. You should have Dr. Diana Pasuko on because she's a UNCW professor. She wrote American Cosmic, and she's very good friends with Chris.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think I just got to the point where she's being referenced in the book,
Oh, cool. Look at
where
that.
they met.
Synchronicity.
Yeah. Where they met each other. Um, but yeah, so I mean, what a beautiful area in which you live, and so much great stuff over there, to go explore and to go do, and a lot of lore and all that kind of stuff. But real quick, let's just let people know and we don't have to get too deep into it because I know it's early phase here. But you've got a new book that you're kind of working on, right?
Yes, yeah, I'm working on it. It's due very, very soon. It's about I'm fascinated by this idea that we're kind of dropped here in this earth, in this life, with no instruction, no manual, no a seemingly obvious help, right? And it's just like, well, figure it out. And we're told that we have past lives, but we don't remember them. And we're told we have a purpose, but we don't know what it is. And that has bothered me my whole life. Like, why aren't we given more overt guidance? And so I've always looked at Earth like a school. And some of us are in kindergarten or preschool, and others of us are in high school or graduate school, and we're all on this journey together, but at different stages. And when we feel as though we're very, very alone and bereft and lost, and we don't know what to do, that's often when we lose our faith. And that's often when we start to doubt and question, who am I? Where am I? Where's the help? And that's where we can go into a dark night of the soul. But I always compare it to being in school. And when you're taking a test, you're alone. You can't ask the teacher what's the answer to number 23, right? Because you're supposed to be alone in that process. So I'm writing this book about how to connect to your guides, your angels, and your loved ones on the other side for help and sustenance and guidance, while also trying to remind people that these invisible helpers that we have around us, they're always here helping us. We just it's up to us to learn how to tune in and raise our vibrations and use things like dreams, like crystals, like intuition to recognize the help that they're offering us through signs and synchronicity and all sorts of cool things. So it's been fun to research, and I'm working on writing it and putting it together, but it's a big thing, but it's been fun.
Yeah, I mean it sounds amazing, and it strikes me that I mean you have to learn how to learn almost, right?
Yeah.
Being dropped here and with no instructions, you have to learn how to be able to even access the instructions. And this book could serve as that guide to access the information and the instructions, right?
That feels like a lot, Ryan. I hope it would be like a guide, but I'm hoping that it will present an alternate view to people of difficult times. I've had a lot of different tragedies in my life and difficult times. And so I understand what it's like to feel alone, and like, where are my helpers now? Where's God in this moment? And yet, when I look back on those difficult times, with the Monday, what's it called, Monday morning quarterbacking, I can see, oh my gosh, I had so much help. But in the moment, you don't often recognize it. You don't recognize that friend showing up at the right moment, or that book falling in your lap right when you needed it is the type of help. And so I'm hoping that this book will help people realize that there's different ways that God, Goddess, however you want to term the creator, reaches out to help and assist us.
Well, it's an inspiring, reassuring story, right? And and I think we have a choice in this life what we decide we are going to even allow ourselves to believe in. And if we really shut ourselves down to just belief in general, it's just going to seem, I mean, I think that's where you can get into, like, let's say, like the hardcore atheist viewpoint of existence. Like, we're alone, we die, the lights go out, nothing matters. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, that's one viewpoint. And I mean, is for me, I'm not going to sit here and say that that person is 100% wrong, because I don't know, because I'm still alive. But I will say that just doesn't seem like there's a lot of room for a lot of oxygen for joy for me in the
Yeah.
way I'm built in that kind of life and that kind of existence. I don't know what it would serve. I don't know what purpose it would serve operating under those assumptions. So
Well,
when
I
we,
think,
yeah.
my uncle was very, very brilliant. He was in Mensa. He was a professor at Johns Hopkins. He talked himself out of God most of his life because he was so smart. And towards the end of his life, he started calling my dad and saying more things like, well, tell me, what do you think about God? And he started coming back to it. And I remember reading, I don't know why, I've always loved George Carlin. And when he died, I remember praying for him because it bothered me that he was an atheist. And I thought, what's he going to see? Because I believe that when we die, at least initially, we see what we believe we're going to see. Right. And then we kind of wake up to the reality of what's on the other side. And so I thought, if George Carlin doesn't believe in anything, like where is he right now? And I did a little bit of research on it, and I found a couple of interviews where even he came back to a little bit of faith, not the Catholicism he was raised in, but at least started going, yeah, maybe there's something. And so I don't know, I wonder about atheists. Are they that absolute in their belief that this is it?
I think it there. I think at some point, yeah, it's a it's a show. It's for show. Atheism for show. At least when publicly asked or put on the spot around people, etc. But in those moments when we're all alone and pondering the nature of the universe and our own existence, there's obviously room for varying ideas and contradicting viewpoints. And
Yeah.
it makes sense to me that Carlin, in a couple interviews, even hinted at certain things. I mean, to me, because he's one of my all-time favorites, and he was brilliant. And I think one of the hallmarks of brilliance is the openness to opposing viewpoints and ideas, right? And exploring those, to a certain degree, anyway.
I
And
think we have to do that. It's something I'm passionate about, is just accepting people where they are on their path, and not, I always tell people at the end of the day, what should be on my tombstone is she didn't know. Because I don't know. I don't know. I have beliefs, I have opinions, I have experiences, but I don't know. And so I'm never going to judge where someone else is on their journey or in their belief system. I do have friends who are atheists. I have friends who are agnostic. I have friends who are pagans. I have friends who are evangelical. And I'm really good friends with all of them. And we're able to talk and accept each other where we are. And I just wish we could all do that. I think it would be a much calmer country, never mind world.
yeah, for sure. And it's when the expectation takes over. Well, I expect you to do this because I do this, is when the trouble begins, right? Now, granted, there are limits to some of this stuff, I think. Um, I mean, I love what you're saying. And, but, in reality, I have a hard time being like, oh, I accept this person on their path, and their path happens to be like a neo Nazi. This is like an extreme example, right? And
Sure.
it's like, okay, I'm just supposed to, like, I think people struggle with, how do I accept that? And when does tolerance become enabling of a very dangerous and hurtful lifestyle, when people are actively trying to hurt other people? And that's where the dance becomes, and that line has become blurred, I think, with the exaggeration and the exploitation of news, um and just trying to get people, reacting in a strong enough way to be able to mobilize action for their side, right? Which is all
Yes.
advertising is, and it's all political campaigning is. It is, how do I get this person fired up enough to be able to count on them taking action when it counts, meaning on voting day, that
Right,
they
right.
will have no
I
choice but to do it, to vote for me, because I've either scared them into it or I've energized them in a way, right?
But if we don't expose ourselves to people of different views, we're never going to change and grow, and they're never going to change and grow, right? I had a friend who was raised very biblically and did not believe in the biblical aspect because of just the way she was indoctrinated with homosexuality. And it really bothered me, because I think we should all love whoever we want to love. And one day I shared a study with her. I can't remember the exact number, but it was something like 60% of animals or 40%, a big number of animals are homosexual. And it was this beautiful story of these two swans in Florida, is how the article started, who fell in love, these two male swans. And they adopted a solo cup and raised it. Did you ever hear of this story? It was at a resort hotel.
They adopted, wait, you said a solo cup, like a
A
beer pong
red
cup?
solo cup, like remember from your college days, Yeah. And they built a nest for it. It was a beautiful story. Anyway, she had never learned any of that. She thought it was a choice. And it totally changed her views on all of that completely. Like who knew? And if we didn't have that discussion, I don't know where
Exactly.
she'd be right now in that standpoint. So I just think it's important to have people with different beliefs in your life and just not be afraid to talk to them, to kindly disagree with them, or just share your opinions, because at the end of the day everything is an opinion. I mean, not everything, but you know what I mean, in terms of
Yeah.
politics, religion, and
Yeah, I do. I know what you mean. And let's pause real quick, throw in some commercials, and come right back, and we're going to pick this chat up. Just as a reminder, if you're listening to me and Paranormal you can go to patreon.com/Ryan Singer, and you can get no commercials for $3 a month. We'll be right back with the wonderful Samantha Fay. And we're back. We're talking about differing viewpoints, and I'll tell you, in the importance of belief and open-mindedness. And there's that great line I just remember from my childhood, trying to prevent people from being open-minded. It's like, be careful, if your mind's too open, your brain will fall out. And I just remember like loving that phrase, um, as a kid, just because of how silly, because of the visual image of just like a head kind of like opening up, and then your brain just because you were willing to believe in too much. And
like a Shel Silverstein poem.
yeah, and it, especially in the world of the paranormal and the esoteric and the spiritual, belief is obviously a fundamental. It's a building block of the whole thing. Without it, you don't really have a lot to go on. I mean, granted, there are the people who come from it at the other angle of investigation and, excuse me, trying to find proof and compile data and examine data. And I mean, I don't disagree with those people, and I love that they're here. But that's not my main passion, right? So when it comes to like exposing ourselves to different beliefs and being willing to listen, there's obviously those moments where we have our opinion changed, right? Because maybe we get exposed to a belief that's different than what we thought we believed in, but for some reason it resonates with us. I'm curious what you think about, like, one of the key ingredients would be in a new idea being presented to us and why it might take hold. What is it about it, like, that resonates so deeply? Or do you know what I mean?
I do. It might be preparation meeting perfect timing, that you're just ready for it at that moment. Sometimes I always like to have something new to research just for my own seeker's mind, right? And I remember when I got really into studying intuition and near-death experiences and what was waiting us on the other side, I kept coming across all this information on consciousness, like really scientific stuff, Rupert Sheldrake and Dean Radin and all of that. And I remember thinking, ugh, I'm not ready for that. I want to stick with these fun NDE stories, and I'm going to go back to Raymond Moody, and I just wasn't ready to really understand all of that, the quantum physics stuff and the collective unconscious. And so I just stayed on that path. And then once I really felt that I'd researched everything I could about NDEs and started meditating a lot more and not meditating for a purpose. I used to always meditate for a purpose. It was more of a give me, give me, give me. I want answers. I want guidance. And I shifted and started meditating just to sit in my own silence or just to connect with my guides. I started doing Reiki where I was just giving my guides energy because I thought whoever gives back to them, we're always like praying for stuff. And I thought, why not meditate and do Reiki and send healing energy back to our team? Then I was ready to study a little bit more about quantum physics and consciousness and super consciousness and all of that. So I think we have to be ready for that opinion to change, that belief to change. And I think the timing has to be right. All of that has to come together. And I don't think there's a formula to it.
Yeah, it is like a moment in time. And I mean, Dean Radin, I love Dean Radin, and I'm trying to, gosh, I'm spacing on the book.
Oh,
Uh,
real
uh,
magic.
Real Magic. What an incredible book.
So good.
And
So good.
talk about, every time I read anything from Dean Radin or look into Dean Radin a little bit more, I'm just like, oh, I want to go. I want to, like, I'm 47. I can go get my master's in parapsychology somewhere. Or maybe can I go get a parapsychology degree? And then I'm like, wait, am I going to be in a laboratory performing parapsychological, you know, tests? I mean, it's fascinating. And I think the results and the examination of the results are fascinating. But for me, like a laboratory setting is a little bit sterile for me, even though actually getting to the conducting of the exams and the tests or whatever would be really, really fun, I think, and interesting.
I do
But I
too,
really,
but
yeah.
I'm too much of a Gemini. I would get bored. I'm a member of the Noetic Sciences and the Rhine Institute, and they have fantastic online classes you can take in parapsychology and all of that. And they have interactive Zooms like monthly, and you can get on and they'll have like a forum of tables just talking about different topics. So I'm more of a dabbler when it comes to that rather than getting my PhD in this.
Yeah, and I think IONS, Institute of Noetic Sciences, that's in Petaluma, California, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm going to be in Petaluma, California, in 4 days. So, and I have like a day off, I think. So I'm definitely going to be trying to get over there and just see if I can snoop around on the
Yeah,
campus. Um, I believe
that would be amazing.
that was Ions was started or was founded by gosh, what's his name? The astronaut. He was an astronaut. Edgar Mitchell.
Edgar Mitchell.
Yeah, Petaluma. What a beautiful, beautiful area of kind of northern central California. If anyone listening has never been there, it's definitely worth a trip. And it's just a small little kind of town, almost kind of too. But anyway, the Rupert Sheldrake, I love the band TED Talk about the fluctuation of gravity that he put out there that you have to find on YouTube. Um, it's all really there is endless ways to kind of lose months of your life researching and looking into some of these really fascinating things. And I totally get what you mean by, I mean, I started reading what's it called? Oh shoot, I can't remember the name of the book because I had to put it down and I haven't revisited it in so long. It's uh HPV. It's Blavatsky's.
Oh yeah, I've started and stopped that a lot of time. I stopped reading because of what I discovered about a lot of the revelations that came out about her inaccuracies.
Oh well, let's discuss if we can real quick.
Well,
I mean, because HPV is, yeah, have been.
a lot of her workers came forward and just talked about, I think what she said obviously has a lot of relevance. It's inspired a lot of people, but a lot of her former workers came forward and just talked about a lot of the trickery that she employed.
Oh
And there's a
really?
lot of, yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of fraudulent things in her biography. And I don't know, I have to respect the writer before I can really take on their ideas, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, she was one of many members who founding members of the Theosophical Society. What is it, General Wolcott, and a handful of other people, I believe. I mean, I love the Theosophical Society, and
I do
I
too.
enjoy getting the newsletters and you know paying the yearly membership fee just to be like, I'm a member of the Theosophical Society. It's like I got a little certificate I can hang on my fake professor wall at some point. But that's interesting. Yeah, I'd have to look more into.
Yeah, it's
Like I
kind
said,
of,
I
I
haven't
don't
looked
know.
into it in forever.
I know. I feel bad saying it because I mean, like I said, I think her ideas are very, very fascinating. But when I just started hearing about some of that, I was like, ugh, I don't know. So yeah, I do think that we can be exposed to other people's opinions and beliefs, but I also think at the end of the day, it comes down to experience. When you experience something for yourself, I think that's what really facilitates powerful, long lasting change. So I think being exposed to other people's opinions, ideas, and beliefs can get us going, let me think about that. Let me research that. Let me look into that. Let me contemplate that for a little bit. But it's not until we have our own experience that I really believe something in our soul starts to shift and change and grow.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. For me, it's two sides of a coin. I think you're right. One is I don't think it serves us any purpose to stay in the library 100% of the time, so to speak. And it also doesn't serve us to be out in the field 100% of the time either. I think everyone has to find like the whatever their balance is, the ratio between those two things when it comes to experience and then also researching and understanding or gaining knowledge of the intellectual kind. But then the experience is really what brings it all home. And then you start to understand, oh, this is why all these things that have been written were written in the first place, because people had the experience, right? But it can be a chicken or the
Exactly.
egg kind of situation, I suppose. At some point, one might be, musing about an experience, like, is it possible, blah blah blah, and then kind of wills it into existence, and then they have this experience, and then which comes first? I'm not sure. It probably depends on the person.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like once you have that experience, and you have a sense of knowing, and it's not even, for me, it's not even important that other people believe my experience. I was on a podcast a couple of years ago, and the host kind of went after me about crystals and was just like, how do you know they work? And why do you think they work? And I was like, look, I don't know. I mean, here's what Dr. Vogel said, or here's what this scientist said, and here's what Melody from Love is in the Earth said. But at the end of the day, I don't know. It might be a placebo. When I wear my rose quartz and I'm opening my heart to love, that could just be a placebo, a subliminal message to my subconscious, not the little pink rock, right? Because at the end of the day, I don't know. But I don't feel a need to defend my beliefs to anyone because I know what I know and I know what I've experienced and I know how working with the unconscious, working with the world of intuition and working with crystals has really expanded and enriched my life. And I don't need anyone else to agree with that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a great way to be. And also, you're not trying to force your beliefs onto other people.
No, I would never
And
do that.
yeah, and I don't think you would need to defend your beliefs unless you're doing such a thing, right?
It's a good
Uh,
point.
and I mean, because if someone really comes after you about a belief thing that you're not trying to force on them, I think the question is like, okay, well, you're clearly you're doubting this, or and by this I mean your own disbelief in this thing, and
That's true.
you're trying to reinforce your own belief in some way by attacking someone else who might have an opposing viewpoint.
Yeah.
Uh,
But talk about the way the collective unconscious works, right? When I first got into this world of intuition, it was not what I wanted. Like my whole life I just wanted to fit in and be normal and go along to get along and and I was married and had kids, and I had the white picket fence, and I had the good teaching career, and everything was normal and fine, and I was acceptable. And I could walk, if someone said to me, "Oh, hi, Samantha, it's nice to meet you. What do you do?" I could easily say, "I teach English." It was easy. And then all of this opened up for me, and it was really hard for me. It went against everything. I felt weird. I felt ostracized. I felt that I didn't fit in anymore. I didn't know how to answer that question. What do you do? And during that time of trying to reconcile uh, who I truly was, not who I had been trying to be all those years, that's when I encountered the naysayers and the skeptics, right? And once I was like, oh, you know what? I don't really care what anyone thinks of me. I mean, I do. I think we all do at some level, but in general, it's like, oh, if you don't like me, if you think I'm weird, if you think I live my life by Mercury retrograde cycles, that's fine. You do you. What you eat don't make me fat, as the saying goes. But once I did that, all the skeptics and naysayers just went away. It was miraculous. But I realized everything we encounter in the world is just holding up a mirror for us of what we're feeling and thinking inside. So if we're feeling thoughts of, oh, this country is so divisive and, everything is going to hell in a handbasket, well, that's what we're going to see. But if we're walking around thinking, I'm opening my heart to love, everyone around me is loving and kind, that's what we're going to see.
Yeah, it is. Our perception makes reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, it's a tale as old as time itself, I suppose, when you enter this world of spirituality and intuition and things like that, and and these phrases that maybe have just only maybe been seen on a coffee mug in a weird shop somewhere, or on some deadhead's t-shirt or something like that that you've never really paid attention to before, you start to think like, oh wow, this is actually a bigger part of my life than I ever realized. And now I'm realizing it, and that realization itself is the perception, right? And so it's kind of the cycle that happens. And then I think there's levels though of this, right? And like we realize that, okay, what we perceive is reality, and then we realize that if we change our thoughts, we can change our reality. And then we realize, okay, this is true, all of this is true. And then when we try to take it another level into the manifestation of really trying to shape our reality, it becomes a little more difficult, right? And I'm not exactly sure what that's about, other than, what is it, remnants of doubt about the fundamental truth of it being real? Or what would you say about that? What do you think about that?
I think it could be that. I think it can also be a kindness where the universe is trying to tell us, is this really what you want? Is this really how you want to shift? Kind of like a checking in with you,
Oh,
where we have a
interesting.
chance to say, yeah, this is really what I want. This is how I want to shift, change, and grow. I've noticed, again, only through hindsight and looking back, that whenever I've tried to make a big change in my life, it'll go smoothly, effortlessly for a little bit. And I'm like, whoa, look at this, look at me. And then I'll hit that block that you're talking about where it's a cul-de-sac of no, 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 no. And I'm like, what is this? A lot of times, especially in my 20s and 30s, that's when I would just give up and say, well, I guess that's not my path. That's not meant for me. But I'm very stubborn and impatient. And so I started learning, no, if I want this, I'm going to go for it. I don't care if there's 1,000 no's. And I realized once I started pushing through, that's when that block, that doubt, all of that, no, 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 those closed doors went away. And now I really do think when we hit that block, it's just a little last chance, kind of like on the fool card in the tarot. I always wonder, that the fool is he about to jump off the mountain? Is he about to leap over a tiny little puddle of space to the next step? Where is he going? And that little dog, is that his companion, or is that the universe going, do you want to do this? Do you want to jump off that mountain? And so I think when we have those blocks, it's our guides, our helpers, our invisible team saying, hold on, this is going to be a big change. Just make sure you really want this.
Yeah. And, I do feel closely connected to that card for a few different reasons. It reminds me, in the way you said that, it was kind of startling to me because, in 2019, when I went to this place in Florida to start this, just to be a part of an investigation team that kind of really reshaped, the future of my life, ultimately, and, my experience with phenomena and things. I did a thing where I would pull one card at different aspects of the investigation just to see if we could glean anything. And the very first card I pulled was the Fool card. And, the beginning of the journey. And which was pretty funny in the moment, out in this field, surrounded by a bunch of dudes who had, firearms on their hips. And I'm like, hold on, we have to pull a card, and so we pulled the Fool card. And why am I blanking on what's the next card in the major arcanum? Right
The
after the
high
Fool,
priestess.
the High Priestess, yes. And so then later that evening, uh, I was like, okay, well, let's see what's happening for us next. And it was the High Priestess. And so it was as if and then the deck for, I think, 3 or 4 cards it was revealing itself in order,
Have you asked
which
like a mathematician? Like statistically, what are the odds?
it seems near impossible, right? And it got to the point where I was almost scared to pull another card. I think after 3, I was probably scared to pull another card because I was just like, is this real? And then also I was scared because I was like, I don't want it to stop, and it won't stop if I just don't keep doing it, right? It'll just be like, we have this, right? And so, um, and I know in through the course of events that were happening around us, in the chaos of just trying to do everything, I think me pulling a card fell to the wayside. But it was really phenomenal in the moment to have that Fool card come out and be like, okay, well, this is because that was my first major like group expedition that was going to be of such length, like a 5-day, 5-night thing at a location. And it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, you're leaping off the cliff here. And there's
Wow.
really no going back once you do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm wrong. I think the next card is the magician. Isn't that the
Oh, is it
one?
the magician?
I think it's the magician. I love
Yeah, I
that
mean,
card too. But with the
yeah,
fool card, I think it's fascinating. If you look at the mountain and where he's about to jump, there could be another mountain right there, right? It could just be like stepping over a pothole, or it could be leaping into the unknown. He doesn't know, we don't know looking at that card. And I think there are so many moments in our life when we have that opportunity to take that leap where you don't know. It could just be a simple step of, okay, that was fun, that was interesting, or it could be a giant leap like you said in 2019 that changes your whole trajectory.
yeah. And what feels like a free fall for a long time turns into something else later, where you realize, okay, I wasn't free falling into, craziness or a darkness necessarily. I just had to get through that initial fear of the fall to get to where I was really supposed to be headed. And
Yeah.
there's that fascinating study about that scientists have done, and I wish I could remember the exact details or the name of the study, but it's from more than a few years ago, where they take people's and they measure brain activity and things like that, where they say, okay, tell me about the worst, some people who have just experienced something that they would characterize as awful, like this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And there's a very specific brain pattern and waves that they can measure when they do that. And then they come back years later and they ask that person about that event, when the people have said, actually, it turns out this was, at the time it felt like it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. In hindsight, I believe it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And they measure their brain waves, and their brain waves have in fact changed. And
Wow.
it's not them just saying that. it is truly, there's such a shift, a fundamental shift in perspective, that it is measurable through scientific data, and not just like, I mean, it is a belief, right? Their belief and their perspective has changed, which leads to the scientific measurement of this thing that happened, which is nebulous, right? It's a memory, it's a recall. Now it is being measured, and the output is drastically different. In fact, it's the opposite of what it was previously.
Yeah, yeah. Well, even memory, I mean, have you ever told a very sad story that happened to you and you can feel your whole body reacting to it? I mean, memories might feel like, oh, it's in the past, but when we're recalling it, it's according to our mind, it's happening right now. And I think from what I've read, one of the ways you can determine if you've healed from a painful past memory is being able to talk about it without having that physical reaction. And so I think the brainwave study is fascinating, but even for just people listening going, well, how would I be able to know if I change my brainwaves? I think if you can tell a sad story without, like, I know for me, like my voice will tighten or my stomach will clench up, and then when I tell it years later, it's just like telling a story. I know, oh, I've healed from that. And that's very empowering.
Yeah, and it's another example of science finally catching up to folksy wisdom,
Yeah,
because there's the old saying, I feel like I can finally talk about it, is what
exactly.
reson is what that rings true for me. And there's also something interesting that makes me think about when we tell these stories that maybe were traumatizing or scary or very sad, and then we get to a point where we can handle telling it. It's the reaction and the energy that it creates within the person hearing it, I think, is also different than maybe if we were to tell it immediately afterward. Because I think immediately afterward, the person hearing it just might be so not off put in like a judgmental way, but because of the energy of it is so sporadic and over the top and crazy and unwieldy, right? That they're just kind of like trying to protect themselves from it. It might just be like, oh, okay, man. Well, just settle down, take a breath, tell me what happened, right? As opposed to years later when you tell that same story and they're just like, oh my God, I got goosebumps all over my body, or it's like a completely different reaction from the person hearing the story too, which is weird.
That is. I never thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, and I wonder if it changes them in a physical way too. I never considered that. That just shows how we're all connected, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it's the energetically trying to find balance in everything potentially. I don't know. Maybe that's what it is.
I
Um,
do. Whenever I teach intuitive development in person, I'll do an exercise where I'll partner up the class. And have you ever like tried to feel someone's aura where you just put your hands, around their head and shoulders and you just hold it until you feel a little pushback? And it's fascinating because I've done this with total skeptics. I have a lot of skeptics and non-believers in my family who were like, "Oh, that's all a bunch of hooey." And I'll do it with them, and even they'll go, "Oh yeah, I do kind of feel a squishy pushback." And so you'll have them figure out like where that line is. And then I have the students visualize one of their happiest days. And I'll just say, just think about it, feel it, smell it, taste it, touch it, really visualize that happy day. And then their partner can feel as they're holding their hands around their head and shoulders, they'll feel their aura expand. It's a beautiful thing. And they're like, oh my gosh, your energy is like pushing out. And then I'll have them think of a very sad day, and their partner can feel their aura comes boom right back into their body, like they're shielding and protecting themselves. And so I
wow.
do think it's a very physical thing. And I agree. Two people can feel it and sense it.
Wow, that's really fascinating.
Yeah. It's a fun exercise.
And people can go to your website probably and get more information about when you're going to be doing classes and things like that, right?
Yeah. Deb and I are teaching an interactive intuitive development workshop at the Edgar Casey Institute the first weekend in November. So I'm
And is
excited to
that
do
down in
that.
Paducah?
It's in Virginia Beach.
Oh, Virginia Beach. Virginia Beach. Okay, cool. Um, well, this has been great, as always. We didn't even talk about aliens.
I know. I need to have you on my podcast so we can talk about aliens.
Yeah, would love to get into that and have that discussion. And I've got some catching up to do on some of this stuff. Like i.e. going to the government's official declassified UFO website that they've launched, amongst in trying to pour over that information, not to mention all kinds of other stuff. So to
It's
catch
a
up
lot.
on,
There's a lot
yeah, there's a lot.
happening.
Yeah, and it's like you need a whole team, and you need to divvy up the responsibilities. Um, but in the meantime, uh, people need to check out the Awake Dreamer. You can go to Amazon, you can go to Barnes and Noble, get the book, take control, and really tap into the power of the dreamscape through Samantha's guidance, and then listen to enlightened empaths, psychic teachers, all the good stuff. Plenty of stuff out there to get your fill, and stay connected, and reap some of the benefits of a life greatly lived from our buddy Samantha Fay.